Hello and welcome to another episode on GMAX Studios. Over the past few weeks, we have been talking about how to take more creative control over the kind of photographs that we take. Last week, for instance, we saw how shutter speed affects our pictures. Today, we shall take a look at how aperture affects the photographs that we take. We shall also try and understand what depth of field is and how aperture can be used to control depth of field to give each photograph that we take a unique look and feel.
For any photograph that we take, there is a point of focus. In this photograph, for instance, the focus is on the number 5. Apart from the point of focus, there is an area in front of and behind the point of focus that looks like it is in focus too. The distance between the nearest and farthest points that appear sharp is called depth of field. A large depth of field is often called deep focus or deep depth of field, and a small depth of field is often called shallow focus or shallow depth of field. How deep or shallow the depth of field is depends on the aperture that we are shooting at. So, the smaller the aperture, the greater the depth of field. Or an easy way to remember it is, the greater the aperture f number, the greater the depth of field. And of course, the smaller the aperture number, the smaller the depth of field. So this photograph, for instance, has a very shallow depth of field because it has been shot at an aperture of f2. And this one has a relatively deep depth of field because it has been shot at f16.
So you say, I've bought this new fast lens with a bigger aperture, and since a bigger aperture lets in more light into the camera, why don't I shoot full wide open all the time? Well, this is something that I learned after making a lot of mistakes.
Using depth of field to your advantage is a matter of deciding how much do you want to reveal or hide in your photographs. Traditionally, while shooting people or portraits, we use a shallow depth of field so that the attention is on the subject. And we use a deep depth of field while shooting landscapes because we want everything to be in focus. But then, there are always exceptions. Suppose you're shooting a group of people. If you shoot with your aperture open, some people in your group will not be too happy with the outcome. So you need to stop down your aperture and make it smaller to increase your depth of field so that all the people in the group are recognizably in focus. So managing depth of field is sometimes a necessity and sometimes a creative call. So primarily, choosing an aperture has got to do with how much you want to reveal in your photographs. In this photograph, for instance, I shot with an aperture of 4.5 to bring focus on the stones which had prayers written on them. But then I thought that the monastery in the background would give them some context. So I stopped down to f20 to get this photograph. Which is a better photograph? That is purely a matter of personal taste. Let us take a look at another example. This photograph was shot at an aperture of 1.8, but I feel that you could hardly make out the surroundings, and perhaps it would look better if one could see a bit more of the environment. So I stopped down just a little bit to f4 and shot this one. In both the photographs at both the apertures, there was hardly any change in the way the subject appeared. But you can alter the feel of the picture by altering the depth of field. There are a few other factors that affect depth of field, but we shall discuss them a few episodes from now. So while there are no hard and fast rules about what kind of photographs to take with what aperture, it is important to think before we press the shutter and know what kind of options are available to us by opening or closing the aperture. Even extremely simple pictures can make use of this to effectively convey what you are trying to say.
So how do we control aperture while shooting? The answer lies in the aperture priority mode of the camera.
The aperture priority mode is denoted by an A on Nikon cameras and AV on Canon cameras. In this mode, you choose the aperture at which you want to take the photograph, and the camera automatically adjusts the shutter speed for a proper exposure. So it might be a great idea to change your cameras to aperture priority mode and see what different kind of pictures can you take at different apertures.
Alright then, since now we know about aperture priority and we learned about shutter priority in the previous episode, in the next episode we shall talk about the other modes on the camera, which is the program or auto mode and the much dreaded and feared manual mode. Till then, keep watching our videos, subscribe to our channel, share our videos, and we will see you next week. Till then, keep shooting.